Okay, so by now you've hopefully read the entire article and you're sort of wondering what to do to put all of it together to get a game controller working. So that's what I'm going to show you with an Xbox 360 controller. However, the method for connecting the controller is sort of not as important as all of the software stuff, because you can basically use any controller and then use the method from there on any of those controllers. But just for the sake of it, what I'm using to actually connect the Xbox controller is this Xbox 360 PC dongle, which goes into a USB cable, which goes into a USB host cable, which then goes into my tablet. So once I have that hooked up, I'm going to go into USB Bluetooth joystick center. I'm going to turn the controller on, give it access to the USB port. It found the controller and it actually reacts to button input. So I'm going to set this up to work with whatever the app is called, that popular shooter game. I'll come back to it later. So basically what you want to do first is enable IME and make sure you select USB Joy IME in the list. If that's not an option in the list, then you haven't read the article and actually done all the steps. So once you've done that, you've basically told the controller that it's now a soft keyboard. So Shadowgun, which is the name of the game I was talking about, uses static button inputs that you can configure in the app itself. You basically have to configure them in the app that controls the game controller. So you can find the exact button mappings online. I've already programmed this one, so if I just start moving buttons around, you can see which buttons each of the game controller buttons work as on the screen. So for instance, if I click the Y button, that works as a W button, which is one of the buttons to actually switch weapons in Shadowgun. So the way you actually program all of this is simply click the button in the list and then you click the button on the controller that you want that button to act as. So with all of that set up, let's just head out and into Shadowgun. I don't really know why people like this game so much, right? I mean, it's great graphics and all, but they should basically be thrown out of the App Store for having a bad controller integration, or Google Play. So let's just resume. So with all of that set up based on the controls that Shadowgun uses, waiting for the punchline while the game is loading forever, you can then suddenly use your game controller for games like Shadowgun. But I have to say that it doesn't work great with Shadowgun, because basically you don't have full analog stick support and all that, because the analog stick has basically been reduced to 4 buttons up, down, left and right. So any movement is a little bit shaky. I also programmed fire buttons and stuff like that, so but it is working, so you can use it like this. So that's one of the ways you can program a game. Just going to quit that one. Now I'm going to head into another game which actually does not have any built-in support for game controllers, meaning that this won't actually work with any sort of game controller natively because it has these two touch analog sticks, basically touchpads that you use to control the little dude to fire and move. However, if you have a rooted device, you can go back into USB joystick center and you can activate, if you have the plugin installed, you can activate this little button up here, which is basically joystick to touch, which is a plugin that allows you to make button inputs act as touch screen inputs. So when you do that, it's very important that you program these two buttons right here in the list, touch edit M and S, which is basically activate touch edit mode, and save touch edit mode, which is what you're going to use in game to program all of this. So let me head back out and edit touch and enter touch edit mode. I did that by pressing this button, which I programmed to be that feature, and now I actually have all of these programmed. But the way you normally do this is that just to delete this first, I'm going to hold the button and then hold down, and then to actually program it again, just do like that, hold in the analog stick and then touch on the screen, and the same for any of the buttons if you want to use those as well. For instance, in a shooter game where you need to fire and reload using on-screen buttons, you basically just hold down the button and then click on the screen where you want it. And then you can also use up and down like this to sort of set the range. Once you have all of that set up, you just save it, and as I move the controller right now, I'm doing this upside down and looking at it from the side, so it's a bit hard to see, but you can now see that the touch sticks on the side move as I move the analog stick, which is because having root enables you to emulate touch inputs. So that's basically the second way you can do this, and this does require root, which the other one does not. So I did do this in sort of a backwards order, but actually the most common way you would program a game controller to work, I guess common sort of depends on what games you intend to play, but emulators in particular and some other games actually allow you to program button input in the game itself. So instead of having predetermined buttons that you need to program in the app that controls the gamepad, you instead do it in the app. So I just clicked the wrong button there, but if we go into settings, input settings, key mappings, this will be different based on the app, but it shouldn't be too difficult to find somewhere in there something that allows you to program the different features. So for instance, if I want C left in this Nintendo 64 controller to correspond to the right D-pad left, actually that won't work because I have the touch thing enabled, but if I didn't have the touch emulation enabled, I could do that. So I could just randomly program these buttons right now. Set trigger would be this one right there, and so on and so forth. So that's perhaps the most common way of doing this, but once again, like with how Shadowgun works, you're essentially turning these analog sticks, and they're called analog sticks because they have almost infinite number of data inputs, because you can sort of push it slightly up to the left and that will be its own control, but you're essentially turning those into just a normal D-pad which has 4 modes. So the preferred way of doing this is to use the touch emulation mode for anything that has analog sticks, because that then allows you to actually have the full analog functionality. However, as I said, that does require roots, so it's definitely not for everyone. And if you're using like a NES emulator or something like that, you're not going to be needing analog stick functionality anyways. So that's very quickly how you set up a game controller to work on different types of games, types of apps. As I said, this is just an example of a game controller, but if I connected this Wiimote over Bluetooth, it would essentially be the exact same thing as far as programming each of the apps. So that's it, and hopefully this helps someone, and thank you for watching.